Good morning. Good morning, Where We Fellowship. It is so good to be here with you this morning. It's been a break, if you will, for a couple of weeks. One, because torn down the studio where I previously was. And then we got hit by some pretty nasty weather. It was very cold and snowing and icing, and there's still ice outside. And then also my family got a little bit of a flu going on. So we're all good. Everybody's doing okay. But it's good to be back here with you for fellowship this morning. We are, in fact, continuing on our journey through Exodus. Last time we got together, we were talking about the actual commandments, and we broke down the commandments in a way that really helps us to understand how these things affect our lives. The commandments affect our life. So we are coming still right out of receiving the 10 commandments in the book of Exodus, and we are going to get into even more instruction. And a lot of these instructions are kind of strange. Make no mistake about it, right? And so when we look at these instructions that we are going to be receiving, it's going to be like, wow, what is going on here? Who are these people? Some of the instructions we're not going to touch. So I'm actually going to skip the chapter 22. And the reason is it chapter 22, chapter 21. So we have the 10 commandments, and then we get into slaves and stuff like that. And then we're going to go right into chapter 23. And the reason is because when we talk about the issue of the right way to treat slaves and stuff like that, it just doesn't apply to us. We don't have slaves. But one of the things that and servants, and we don't, buy people. And they did at that time. And it's important to understand this, that one of the things with the 10 commandments and with these rules and things that are following, it's important to understand, because a lot of people will look at this and say, wow, God was doing that. God was telling them to have slaves. God was telling them that if a slave, beats the servant, this and that, and then he's got to be put to death and this and that. And I think we need to understand something, that a lot of this wasn't God coming in saying, this is what you need to do. You need to start going and getting slaves. And no. The reality is that this is what these people were used to. These are worldly things that God was now stepping into these people and addressing, eventually breaking them away from these things. One of the ways in which I've heard the 10 commandments, again, it's not that God was introducing these ideas and concepts that people had no idea what he was talking to. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt honor thy mother and thy father. Thou shalt, all these things, right? We imagine that God was speaking these things and people are like, wow, what concepts? And it wasn't like that at all. What God is really saying is that these are the observable things of the way in which you live your life. For generations now, I want you to imagine with me, God is saying, for generations now, I've witnessed you all and how you treat each other. I've witnessed your adulterous affairs. I've witnessed how you beat each other. I've witnessed how you treat one another. And so the 10 commandments then now becomes a list of God saying, I see these things. I've seen all of them that you all do. This is how moving forward, you are going to be separated for me. And you're going to start to distance yourself from those things in this world. The same is true with what we're about to get into. Laws, justice, mercy. And the reason we're skipping over the part about having slaves and being slave owners is, again, we don't do that these days. We don't have servants and slaves and stuff. But at the time, they did. And what God is saying is, I see how you operate. You buy people. You have slaves. And how many of you know narcissistic people? They really view themselves as being owners of others, right? How many of you can attest to that? You've dealt with narcissists, and they seem to have that that inner drive that says people belong to me until you break free. And in a way, you in that relationship were in fact a slave to them. You were a slave until you broke free. And by the grace of God, we're able to break free. Okay, you're nobody's property. I know I belong to nobody. No narcissistic person is going to treat me like a piece of property, right? And same with you. So we are able to break free. But we can see that spirit that is within narcissistic people existed way, way, way back then, even at the time of Exodus. And God is addressing it within the group. And it's important to understand that even within that group, that spirit existed. That narcissistic spirit that wanted to take people in as property and maybe didn't have the best intentions with them. God is addressing them, saying, I've seen that you treat people poorly. I've seen that you hurt people, that you beat people. And if you do, you'll be put to death yourself. God is saying that the way in which you did that stuff is done, right? Today, in today's society, it's kind of like we're going back. Narcissistic people treat people however they want. And we're entering in that time again now where the Lord is saying, no, you're going to be put to death. And watch this. If you walk away from a narcissistic relationship, a toxic family, you are putting them to death. Okay? You don't have to physically hurt them. You can put them to death by getting them out of your life. Don't worry about what they do and let them scramble and go off and try to find other servants and slaves and whatever. And maybe they will. Maybe they won't. It's none of your business. Let them live their life scrambling, trying to find people to serve them. It won't be me. It won't be you. That's what the royal we is here for, to make sure. So we're going to continue on right now in Exodus. Sorry about that long intro. We're going to continue on Exodus chapter 23. So if you have your Bibles with me, open up to Exodus chapter 23. Again, we're skipping 22. And the reason is because it dealt with slaves and stuff, and we're not going to get into that right now. So chapter 23, we're going to talk about laws of justice and mercy. Chapter 23 begins with this: do not spread false reports, and do not help a guilty person by being a malicious witness. Wow. Right now that's getting into that's getting into a lot of the ways in which narcissistic people operate right there now, isn't it? Do not spread false reports. Do not help a guilty person by being a malicious witness. Narcissists are all over that one, right? They gossip and spread lies and rumors and, oh, did you see so-and-so said this? And they twist things. Narcissistic people twist the meanings of things. Oh, so-and-so said this, so it means this, right? I've been accused of that. I couldn't believe it. I'm going to say that from my own standpoint, my own perspective, it seems as though most people on the far liberal side, I'm going to say it, far Democratic side, are really, they twist what people say. There was a time I said it could be very hurtful. It could be very hurtful. It's just, and this is exactly what God is saying. Don't do that. Don't spread false reports. Sometimes, have you ever watched this in society? You're watching somebody be attacked because somebody twisted what they said, and you're like, they didn't say that. Those words didn't come out of their mouth. But society has convinced people it doesn't matter if the words come out of their mouth or not. If you can perceive that that's what they're saying, then call it out. And the problem with that is that you have no idea if that's what they're perceived to being said, because that's, that gets into the realm of you trying to understand their thoughts, and you can't. Narcissists do that. They will take what you say and twist it into something to what they want you to be saying. God is saying, don't do that here. Do not follow the crowd in doing wrong. When you give testimony in a lawsuit, do not pervert justice by siding with the crowd. God is saying here, don't follow what the crowd is doing. There was a lot of, and it was sad, but there was a lot of crowds, especially, again, I hate to bring the liberal side into this, but it was just the truth of what was going on. They would go out and destroy buildings, light things on fire, do this and that, burn it all down. And they were convinced that that was the right thing to do. God is saying, don't follow crowds when they're doing wrong. It is wrong. I mean, common sense says it's wrong. And a lot of people out there say, well, that's how we take revenge. We go out and we're doing this in honor of so-and-so because of what happened to them. So we're going to burn down all these buildings. Well, that doesn't make that right. And here, what God is saying here is don't follow those crowds. So what's interesting to understand here is that, one, these types of crowds have always existed. Crowds that believe in let's destroy because we're not happy. So let's destroy. God, these crowds have always existed. And God said, if you're going to be set apart, if you're going to be my people, don't do that. Don't follow those people. It's a trap. It's a death trap. And how many of you know that even in recent years, those things have been death traps? Those crowds have gone out to destroy stuff and more people get hurt. Sometimes their own people. And then they go to the courts, right? And try to say, it's not fair. We were burning down buildings peacefully and people and some of our people got hurt and some of our people lost their lives. Well, no kidding, dummies. If you're going to be destructive, bad things are going to happen to you. Don't be destructive. God is saying, don't be destructive. Don't go and amongst your people. And it's also important to understand here that God is saying amongst your people, don't be destructive because you are in disagreement. Don't try to destroy something because you're in disagreement. People will get hurt. Okay? If you come across your enemies, and this is interesting too. It gets even more interesting here. If you come across your enemy's ox or donkey wandering off, be sure to return it. The key thing, and the reason why I'm bringing all this up is because what the Lord is saying is that, look, even within your own group, you're going to have enemies. And again, God is not putting in the idea of having enemies. God is saying, I see that as a group of people, you are going to have enemies within yourself, within your group. There's going to be people you don't like. There's going to be people who don't like you. There's going to be people who want to hurt you. There's going to be people who want to kill you right there in your own group, in your own family. And this is why God has to lay out these laws. This is why the Ten Commandments exist. It's because God is addressing the nature of humanity and that you're going to have enemies and people who hate you right there living amongst you. So this is how you're going to be. God is saying, I can't change it. I can't make you all suddenly love each other. I can't do that. And this is something that's hard for us. We think that, and let me help you out here with this as well. We think that this idea of this group and a community, and I've heard this before, people want a community, they want a group, and they think that why can't we just have a group and a community of people and it all be safe and everybody be good and loving and kind? Even in churches and stuff, there's going to be fights. There's going to be backstabbing. There's going to be backbiting. There is no such thing as a group of people that can come together and there not be formed some sort of opposition and enemies. It's just going to happen. So God is saying, this is your nature. And so these are my rules for you dealing with your nature. All right. If you come across your enemy's ox or donkey wandering off, be sure to return it. If you see the donkey or someone who hates you fallen down under its load, do not leave it there. Be sure to help them with it. Do not deny justice to poor people in their lawsuits. Have nothing to do with a false charge, and do not put an innocent or honest person to death, for I will not acquit the guilty. Right? The Lord is saying, if you put an honest person to death, if you put an innocent person to death, meaning that person did nothing to you, right? God will not acquit the guilty. God will pursue that situation. God will be the one to destroy that person's life. And this is news, this is something for you and I to consider when we come out of toxic relationships with narcissistic people. It's real easy to look at the situation and say narcissistic person or an abusive personality has taken so much from us, hurt us, and we walk away and we feel as though we were killed. And in a way, we were killed out of that relationship. But in exchange, we've had to destroy that relationship. So we have now also killed off that relationship. But a lot of times we think, with all the pain and all the suffering that they caused us, where's God? When will they experience that pain? When will payback be given? Right? Well, it says right here, God is saying, I will not acquit the guilty. So one thing's for certain is if toxic people are guilty of hurting you and you are innocent, right? And you are innocent. And that's key. A lot of times, we think of it as we were innocent in the situation, but sometimes we have to double check that, right? Were we really innocent? I mean, if when I look at my own experience with toxic people and bullies, was I innocent to an extent? But at what point did I exercise my freedoms a bit too much by continuing to be with those people instead of leaving the situation, which I should have, right? And then if I kept going into the situation, and by the way, again, that which goes against God's laws, God says have nothing to do with people who are spreading false witness and false testimony. God says stay away from these people. These people were doing that stuff with others, and I was entertained by it. Does that make me innocent? Right? One of the things about narcissistic abuse is we tend not to understand just how abusive the nature of these people are until it's aimed at us directly. But prior to that, we're almost entertained by it. Not entertained like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic, but entertained in a way of, I'm here. Okay. Oh, wow. That's brutal. Oh, that's rough. Oh, wow. The way you treat that person over there, that's not very nice. Right? But we don't really feel it and don't feel the need to get out until it's aimed at us. Okay? It makes me wonder if we're really then innocent. Or if it's the narcissistic abuse is more the result of a failure on our part to recognize and realize that we are with people we have no business being with, doing things we have no business doing, going places we have no business going. What are we doing there? And I think at some point we lose our innocence in the situation by staying. And then we try to fix and we try to correct and this and that. Okay? It continues on. Do not oppress a foreigner. You yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners because you were foreigners in Egypt. Then we get into the Sabbath laws. For 6 years you are to sow your fields and harvest the crops, but during the 7th year, let the land lie unplowed and unused. Then the poor among your people may get food from it, and the wild animals may eat what is left. Do the same with your vineyard and the same with your olive grove. This is an interesting one right here. Number 10, for 6 years you were to sow your fields and harvest the crops, but during the 7th year, let the land lie unplowed and unused. Imagine this. You know how we work 6 days and on the 7th day we take a rest? The Lord is saying here, work 6 years and on the 7th year take a rest. For an entire year, do nothing. How many of you would like to take a year off? Huh? How many of you would like to take a vacation for a year? Well, I mean, if we go back to these ancient principles, that's exactly what God is saying here. There's something to that Sabbath. And an entire year is a Sabbath law back then. Work 6 years, do your fields, sow your crops, harvest, work hard. On the 7th year, don't do anything. Let everything grow. That way the poor people can come and they can benefit off of whatever that growth is. And you can have the whole year, take the year off. Wow. I'd like that. I'm down with that. I'll work 6 years and on the 7th year take it off. And then it goes on into the days as well. Work your 6 days. 6 days do your work, verse 12. But on the 7th day do not work, so that your ox and your donkey may rest, and so that the slave born in your household and the foreigner living among you may be refreshed. Be careful to do everything I have said to you. Do not invoke the names of other gods. Do not let them be heard on your lips. Okay, again, the Lord is saying, I've seen in your group, I've seen in your generations, other gods being talked about, other principles and ideas. Don't do that. Okay, do not be led astray. Do not confuse. The Lord is saying, do not confuse what I'm trying to do with other ideas and principles out there. No one is to appear before me empty-handed. Celebrate the festival of harvest with the first fruits of the crops you sow in your field. Actually, let me back up here. Verse 14. The 3 annual festivals, that's what we're talking about here. 3 times a year, you are to celebrate a festival to me. This is another thing, too. God is all about festivals. And this is awesome. I look at 3 times a year, these people would have festivals. Celebrate the festival of unleavened bread. For 7 days, eat bread made without yeast, as I command you. Do this at the appointed time in the month of Aviv, for in that month you came out of Egypt. So the first festival that we're talking about here is a festival that celebrates them coming out of Egypt, out of oppression, out of that toxic relationship. Which, by the way, I would love for us at some point to be able to celebrate our release, our exit from toxic relationships, right? Getting out from under that oppression. I want to work on that at some point during the year. You know what I mean? We need to celebrate leaving these toxic relationships, leaving these toxic family dynamics. It continues on. Celebrate the festival of unleavened bread. Do this at the appointed time in the month of Aviv. No one is to appear empty-handed. So they're to have their fruits and whatnot, their first fruits. Celebrate the festival of harvest with the first fruits of the crops you sow in your field. Celebrate the festival of ingathering at the end of the year. So here's the other 2 celebrations. Celebrate the festival of harvest with the first fruits of the crops you sow in your field. That's one. Celebrate the festival of ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather in your crops from the field. 3 times a year, all the men are to appear before the sovereign Lord. Do not offer the blood of a sacrifice to me along with anything containing yeast. The fat of my festival offerings must be kept until morning. Bring the best of the first fruits of your soil to the house of the Lord your God. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. Again, a lot of this stuff we're like, what is he talking about? Do not cook a young goat in the milk of its mother? The heck? But again, the Lord is, and I know it sounds weird, but this is what people were doing. We have to assume that the reason the Lord is addressing these things, the reason these things are being written out, is because this is what people have been seen doing back then. Who knows? Maybe somebody, they thought, okay, well, let's cook this and the milk of this and like seasoning. Who knows? And God said, don't do that stuff. It's weird. It's gross. And so God is saying, I've seen this. Don't do it. And a lot of this stuff, again, we don't really follow. And that's why it's difficult for us to process these things. But I think it's important to understand that the Lord wants you to celebrate what he's done in your life, delivering you from the toxic relationships. He wants to celebrate your growth, wants to celebrate this new movement that you have out of captivity. And the Lord is giving instructions on how to do that. And not only that, but how you can go on living your life, how you can go back to a place in time where you work 6 days and rest on the seventh, where you can even work 6 years and rest on the seventh. I think this is incredible. I think it's something that we should figure out in our own lives how to honor. You know, we get so twisted up and tied up going in toxic relationships. We become accustomed to the toxic lifestyle that when we are out, we need to now see, well, how can we change and live according to what God would like out of our lives? It may look way different, but this is something that we can all strive to do. All right. And then from there, from this point on, God's going to talk about how he's going to continue to lead the people. So we see the festivals, which, by the way, we know that God is all about festivals. The Lord wants us to celebrate in freedom. Verse 20, see, I am sending an angel ahead of you to guard you along the way and to bring you to the place I have prepared. How many of you know that you are not yet delivered? You're on your healing journey because God is still preparing a place for you. How many of you are aware of that? And so if we stay true to what the Lord is trying to instill in us, then God will deliver us to that place. I am sending an angel ahead of you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place I have prepared. Pay attention to him and listen to what he says. It's important to understand also, people, that there is a voice, there's a fear, there's a caution, there's something inside of us that keeps us out of toxic relationships once we experience that. Whether you're leaving family, whether you left friends, whether it was a relationship, that thing that has kept you out of relationships, a lot of people are afraid of that thing. A lot of people say, when will I be the person I used to be? Why have I changed so much? On and on and on. Well, that thing could very well be this guidance that the Lord is talking about. I will send something before you. It's going to push out of the way all the bad things that want to ensnare you in your life. You see, we don't look at it in this culture and in this day and age. We think, well, we don't have a whole lot of friends. Well, that must mean I'm a bad person. I'm not the person I used to be. I don't go to these places anymore. Well, maybe because the Lord doesn't want you there at all to begin with. Okay? So it's preparing you for the place that the Lord has for you. Okay? And this is what the Lord is saying. Pay attention to him. Pay attention to that angel. Pay attention to that guidance that's keeping you out of toxicity. Listen to what that guidance says. Do not rebel against him. What does that mean? Well, if we're not careful, we can go back to toxic relationships. If we're not careful, we can fall back into the toxic traps of people who don't have our best intentions in heart. This could be your family. This could be your brothers and sisters. It could be an ex-boyfriend, an ex-girlfriend. I think we need to understand and look at what the Lord is saying here. If you go back to these things, you're going to be rebelling against that voice that I am calling to lead you. If you would just stay straight, if you will just follow that voice, and if you will just keep going, ignoring the toxicity, you'll make it to where I'm trying to get you. But if you rebel against that voice and you fall back into the toxicity, well, you're going to fall into a trap. You're screwed. And once again, I'm going to have to come in and scoop you out. Right? There's a funny meme I saw, and I don't know where it was, but it's a video, and it said me being saved by God or whatever, and it shows this young man taking a sheep out of a crack. It looks like the sheep fell into a crack, and the young man is getting him out of the crack, puts him on the side, and that sheep runs real quick, runs away, and jumps, and boom, straight back in that crack again. And it's so true. We get out of the crack to go skipping along and jump right back in the crack. And this is what the Lord is saying. Don't do that. Stay straight. Stay straight. So if you listen carefully to what he says and do all the things I say, I will be an enemy to your enemies and will oppose those who oppose you. So if we listen to the Lord, follow in his guidance, we won't have to worry about the toxic people and the narcissists out there, not our narcissistic parents and siblings, none of them. The Lord will address that for us. All we have to, it's so simple. Our part in this toxic world is so simple. It's right here. I'm going to read this again. If you listen carefully to what he says, that guiding voice that says, stay away from toxic people, and if you do all that I say, I will be an enemy to your enemies, and I will oppose those who oppose you. How simple is that? If we will just do our part and stay away from the toxic people, we don't go along with what they say, stop going to their parties, stop trying to argue with them, stop trying to fight with them, the Lord will oppose them. They will stay far from us. Listen, I know this because the toxic bullies in my life are nowhere near me in my life right now. They're nowhere near. The only issue that I've struggled with, as with you, is sometimes wishing they could be. But what the Lord is saying is, have nothing to do with those people. Right? My angel will go ahead of you and bring you into the land of the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hivites, and Jebusites. I will wipe them out. Do not bow down before their gods or worship them or follow their practices. You must demolish them and break their sacred stones to pieces. Worship the Lord your God, and his blessing will be on your food and water. I will take away sickness from among you, and none will miscarry or be barren in your land. I will give you a full lifespan. I will send my terror ahead of you and throw into confusion every nation you encounter. I will make all your enemies turn their backs and run. I will send the hornet ahead of you to drive the Hivites, Canaanites, and Hittites out of your way. But I will not drive them out in a single year, because the land would become desolate and the wild animals too numerous for you. Little by little I will drive them out before you, until you have increased enough to take possession of the land. Wow. A lot of times we wonder, again, God is addressing their hastiness there. We want to know, why doesn't the Lord get rid of these people? Just get rid of them. The Lord here is telling his people, listen, you have enemies out there. They're not going to treat you well. I'm not going to just get rid of them, because you will be overwhelmed by the land. You'll be overwhelmed by the amount of animals. So I'm going to slowly drive them out. All right? Sometimes the Lord slowly drives people out of our lives. Okay? For one reason or another. And we may not see the benefit, but as the Lord is saying, there will be a benefit. There is a benefit towards that if you trust in the Lord, right? Verse 31, I will establish your borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, and from the desert to the Euphrates River. I will give into your hands the people who live in the land, and you will drive them out before you. Do not make a covenant with them or with their gods. Do not let them live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me, because the worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you. Look, I'm going to read this last line again, because this is how you and I need to view toxic people who are not on the same understanding. Okay, not of the same background, same faith, same understanding. Right here. Do not make a covenant with them or with their gods. Do not let them live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me. I deal with a lot of people who invite these toxic people in to live with them, to stay with them, right? And what does the Lord say right here? Do not let them in. Do not let them live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me, because the worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you. Toxic people, narcissistic people, they do worship they worship themselves as gods, apparently. But you have to understand that anytime you get involved with toxic people, family members, friends, that you run the risk of sacrificing and forfeiting what you believe and your values in exchange for their gods, whatever those gods are. And their gods may be drugs. Their gods may be their poker night, like it was in my situation. Their gods may be their family ritual taco night. Okay. And I dealt with this with in-laws. I didn't realize it, but when I was going over to their Wednesday night dinners with the bullying in-laws that I dealt with, it's like for a while I lost who I was in exchange for their ritual, their weekly ritual of coming together. It was their God. I gave up what I knew was right in exchange for their gods. And it became a snare. And ultimately what happened is I started going to their parties. And I remember at their parties, there was all kinds of weird stuff. There were drugs. There was pot and weed and this and that. I'm not, the Lord did not want me to have anything to do with that stuff, but I was there. And the reason is because right here, do not let them in your land. They will cause you to sin against me, because the worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you. So whether or not we partake in what these people do in their lives, maybe they drink, maybe they're partiers, maybe they have weird rituals, maybe they're toxic, whatever the case may be. Maybe we don't necessarily partake in it. However, you can get stuck and trapped in that toxic environment, and that can be a snare. That surely was the case with me, with the in-laws. I didn't partake in the stuff they did, but for some reason I was drawn, and I couldn't wait to be at that location because of the people, because of the party atmosphere. And this really speaks to me. The Lord is saying that became a god. Those people that get together, you fell into the trap of that being what you want, of that being what you look most forward to in life. All right. With that, I'm going to wrap it up right there. Again, it's difficult. These are difficult passages as we're reading, as God is refining a people, God's people who were lost and broken and oppressed in Egypt. God is unbreaking, slowly but surely unbreaking all of the toxicity from their lives. He's laying down rules, and I believe that he wants to lay down rules in all of our lives so that we will never again fall into the traps of toxic relationships, that we'll never again fall into the traps of being a part with people we have no business being a part of. All right? We're going to wrap it up right there, and we'll be back next Shabbat, next Saturday, as we continue on our journey of Exodus, and things are going to get even stranger, but we're going to hopefully pray on and ask the Lord to open our hearts and help us to understand what's going on and what's being said. Thank you all for being here. Again, I'd like to go ahead and invite those of you who aren't aware of this. Next month, March, I'm going to be live and in person in St. Louis, March the 12th from 11 to 1. You can find out information at the website, www.jointheroyalwe.com. There's limited seats for this event. The title of the message there is going to be Life After Death. That's a message of hope. So I'm looking forward to that. Hope to see a lot of people there. And with that, we're going to have more videos on the Royal We throughout this week. Thank you all for being here. Blessings to you. Shabbat Shalom. Have a great week, everybody. And we'll be back next Saturday. All right. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.